Okay, and we're live. So, welcome to the Sharīah Anatomy podcast. I'm James.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm Chaplain Gareth Bryant. This is Dr. James Ferguson. Welcome to another episode of Sharīah's Anatomy.
Yep. So, we're here talking about bioethics from an Islamic perspective. This is medical, healthcare questions that require ethical decisions. Like we said before, doctors don't always have all the answers in secular medicine. So, thank God we have Islam to help guide us and help us find answers to some of these hard questions. So, let's introduce ourselves. Gareth is a chaplain since 2014. You just got back from a talk you gave.
Yeah, I was an attendee and a presenter for the annual Global Muslim Mental Health Conference. This year, it was hosted by Clare College of Cambridge University. I presented and defended research pertaining to tajneen, jinn influence, jinn possession versus mental illness.
Nice. So at Cambridge, wow, that's the Harvard of Europe.
It's like the Yale of Europe.
It's like the Yale of Europe, yeah.
And Oxford will be like the Harvard of Europe, yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm a board-certified doctor in family medicine and did my residency in Cleveland and my clerkships in New York City. So we're just going to come a disclaimer like we always do every time that neither of us are scholars.
We're not Islamic experts in anything. We just have some type of expertise, and Allah has given us the opportunity to express our expertise on this podcast.
Exactly. So neither one of us has any ijazah, and please don't take what we say as a formal fatwa ruling. Please consult your local scholar.
And also don't take what we have to say as 100% solid medical advice at all times. Consult religio-scholastic professionals whom you trust, and also seek out objective medical professionals who you trust.
That is true. Although I do have a New York medical license, you're not my patient, so please, I don't know your story or case, so we'll go from there. All right, so let's talk about some interesting bioethics topics that are affecting us today from a Islamic perspective, like we said. Today's topic is about stem cells. Now, let's just give a quick overview medical-wise of what stem cells are.
Educate us about what stem cell is, what stem cell research is.
Right. So when an egg is first fertilized, it starts multiplying into a clump of cells called an embryo. And then the embryo, that's one cell, turns into 2 cells, turns into 4 cells, turns into 8, 16. It multiplies and multiplies until it becomes a fetus, which becomes a baby.
Right.
So humans have 100 trillion cells.
That's a lot.
You and I, as an adult, have that many. And there's 200 different types of cells in your body: liver cells, skin cells, blood cells, arteries, brain cells, the whole bit. So in the beginning, these early embryo cells are just regular cells. They're not specific. And by 5 days, the little embryo has about 200 cells, and they will eventually start differentiating. They're going to start turning into liver cells, skin cells, as they multiply.
So they start to be cultured into different specific things.
Right.
Whether it be nails, hair, skin.
Exactly.
Right.
So in the beginning, they're just not differentiated. They're just cells, as like a big lump. So so each one of them has the full set of DNA for every body part. And that point. So what we like to do is what the hope is that we can take these cells. If you take a couple out, they repair themselves, and this is how it's attractive to science, because if we can take these stem cells, that's what stem cells are. These are these early undifferentiated cells. If we can take them, we can use them to grow new organs back, because they turn into anything. So if like a liver, if you lost your liver, you can turn one into a liver cell and it grows into a whole liver because they multiply, and take the shape and everything.
So with these fresh, unspecified cells, before they evolve into specified cells, if you culture them properly, you can mold them into any organism that you want.
Right. We don't quite know 100% how what tells this cell you're going to be a liver cell, you're going to be a pancreas cell, you're going to be a spleen cell. But we know that certain hormones and stuff will tell them, okay, if this is the liver cell, next door is going to be the pancreas, you're going to be the pancreas one.
Well, those things will be exclusively genetically determined anyway, right?
Well, these stem cells have the whole set of chromosomes and DNA, and then the body says, okay, turn this gene on, turn this gene off. You're going to be liver. You're not going to be making sweat.
So as we develop in the wombs of our mothers, these 200 cells they start to become the genes start to either become active or inactive, and or dominant or recessive.
Right. So each cell's a little different. They turn on certain genes to do certain things and turn off certain genes to do other things. So that's how they make different proteins for each part of your body. So the idea is that these cells they have a lot of potential. We could do a lot with them. The idea is that, if you, lizards and starfish, you cut a lizard's leg off, it'll grow a tail, it'll grow a new tail.
Right.
So if we can take these sort of stem cells, maybe we could grow back organs, body parts. That's the whole idea.
But what's the catch?
So there's a couple things. One, there's some ethics questions about it, and there's some health risks about it.
Okay.
Because we're using certain stem cells to help treat leukemia and stuff like that.
Certain types of cancers.
Right. The problem is, because these cells are multiplying and they don't have anything telling them to stop,
ironically, they themselves can morph into different types of tumors or cancers.
Yes, they can turn into tumors, and that's a fear, and that's a worry.
That can either be benign or malignant.
Right. It's because this is, stem cells are, fetal cells that are growing, so they can turn into anything.
They're unpredictable, basically.
They're unpredictable. And that's the problem. That's one of our risks. We hope that we can cure diabetes and cure sickle cell and other things with it.
And also, once that stem cell organ is implanted into the body, realistically, we have no idea how that will react to the other part of your body. Let's say, for example, someone has a heart transplant that's a result of a stem-celled heart. What if that heart starts to just randomly start to replicate and you start to develop multiple hearts in your body?
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's one of the risks, because we're trying to tell the body, okay, grow this, turn into that, and it's going to make that shape, but is it going to last? Is it going to get rejected? Does it have its own? Is your immune system going to say no? Right. Is it going to grow and grow? And what if it becomes too big of an organ?
Right. Or what if it's like, what if multiplicity happens? What if you have this heart that's a product of a stem cell, and then just actively, it just replicates another heart, and then another heart, or another organ, or another finger, or whatever. Yeah.
So we don't have all the.
What if it becomes like DJ Khaled, another one, and it keeps happening.
So the problem is we don't have all the tools yet, because the body will naturally say how to turn on and turn off
and
cells.
Right.
Adapt. We can't in the lab just do that so easily.
Yeah.
We're learning.
Because it's theoretical in a lab.
It's theoretical. We're learning it on like tiny little animals, and maybe we're hoping to one day scale up to humans. Right now we have all the DNA of a fly. And we can take a fly DNA and say, okay, make eyes, make the wings.
Make it separately, but in terms of making it a whole.
Yeah, humans are more complicated.
Right.
So, trying to say, I could say grow a liver. A liver is just a bunch of cells in a lump. But if I want to make lungs, then you have to say I need to make the arteries, the veins, the bronchioles, the parenchyma. There's like whole layers. It's not just one cell for your lungs.
As a matter of fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's actually a verse in the Quran where Allah speaks about if persons were to gather to recreate a fly.
Yeah.
Or an insect, they wouldn't be able to do it. And you just mentioned they can only replicate certain things separately, not holistically.
Yep.
And even if they were able to do it holistically, it would still fail. With the cloned sheep.
Yes. So that's going to come into our topic as well, because there was a very famous story in the 90s. There's a cloned sheep named Dolly.
Yeah.
They took DNA of the sheep, injected it into an empty egg, and then cloned the sheep. They made a whole new sheep from scratch. But it was the identical DNA to the other sheep.
Right.
However, that sheep was actually not that healthy, and they learned a lot as well as because the sheep got arthritis really early. And it turns out, yes, you can copy the DNA, but there's certain other parts of the DNA. Turns out DNA can get old.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that. There's something called epigenetics. There's things that turn on and off the genes. There's stuff around the DNA. So this sheep, even though it was a brand new baby sheep, was starting to get old people problems. It was pretty amazing.
Right.
Can you close that?
Well, yeah. So, this is why Allah says in the Quran, "Blessed is Allah, the best of creators." Mm-hmm. Because when Allah creates something, it's perfect the first time. He doesn't have to go back and start over, be like, "Oh, I screwed up. Let me tweak this." No, that doesn't happen. When Allah creates something, it's finalized. It's final. Period. And if there is some type of genetic deformity, that's merely a test that Allah imposes upon creation, on ourselves or other people, to test how we will behave ourselves, and to test how others will behave towards us.
Makes
what I'm saying? So, but it just, and holistically, when Allah creates something, it's created in perfection.
Makes sense.
So when Allah creates a sheep, Allah doesn't create a sheep that has arthritis as a 2 or 3 year old. You know what I'm saying? You clone a sheep, that's what happens.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So all in all, let's just get in, since we already started, let's get into the whole stem cell.
So the thing about stem cells is there's a lot of potential. It can do a lot.
Right.
We think it could cure diseases. It can grow things back. Right. However, there's a lot of opposition, because when you harvest these stem cells, you have to basically take them out of an embryo, like a fertilized egg, and you're essentially destroying the embryo.
So basically, you're inducing an abortion, basically.
Well, kinda, and pretty much in a way, because if you're taking enough cells out of the egg will die. So you need this. You can't it's not like I can scrape a few off and then it just keeps growing into a baby.
So okay, let's say for example, if a person gives birth, right, and
Yeah.
they have like the placenta from birth.
Yeah.
Is that what doctors use to extract stem cells?
That's a good question. So there's actually there's more than one kind of stem cell.
Right.
The babies, they start off with the embryo and they make stem cells that way.
Right.
There are some stem cells inside the umbilical cord and the placenta. Post-birth, because some of the stem cells will branch out and become a placenta.
Right.
From the baby
as a result of embryonic development.
Right. So the embryo will grow into a umbilical cord and a placenta, which is going to implant into the mother. So some of the baby's DNA and some of the stem cells are still in that placenta. So when we take when a baby's born, we try to clamp both ends of the umbilical cord because there's blood inside and some stem cells.
And basically, you try to harvest it that way.
We try to use it that way. It's not a lot. And by that point, they're sort of differentiated because those are mostly blood stem cells.
Right.
Like the scientists were trying to find, can we take those and rewind them and turn them back into hair cells or liver cells or
neutral cells.
Or pancreas cells or neutral cells. Exactly. They're not really, because at that point, they've already kind of branched out like a family tree.
Right.
And they've sort of become
They've already become their own. They've already become like specialized or specified.
Yeah, and they're helpful because we can use them they can use like bone marrow. You can use them to help with sickle cell patients, treat leukemias and things like that. But that's sort of limited because they've already started to turn.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at. So if you harvest some of these embryonic stem cells, embryonic ones are from the early embryo, right?
Right. So basically, what you're saying is to get the full, unadulterated neutral cells, then abortion is something that would be a necessity, basically.
Well, when you say abortion, basically they won't call it abortion because it's a cells, it's little cells in a petri dish.
Right.
You don't want to call that a life. Now, some people say life begins at conception. A fertilized egg is a fertilized egg.
Right.
If you say life begins, and then yes, you're ending that.
I mean, realistically, based on what you mentioned, you would be in fact terminating a potential pregnancy.
Yes, you are.
To harvest the stem cells.
Exactly. Now, it's not like I'm taking them out of a pregnant woman. Most of the time, these are in vitro fertilization, meaning someone who can't get pregnant, we're fertilizing eggs in a petri dish.
That takes a different spin on it.
Exactly.
Okay, that takes a different spin.
So the way most of the time it's done is we talked before about surrogacy in the last episode,
right?
Where if you can't get pregnant, they're going to harvest some eggs, they're going to take some sperm and try to fertilize them in a petri dish.
So in that process, that's when the stem cells, that's when it happens.
So yeah, we wait 5 days to start to multiply into like a raspberry sort of thing with a bunch of little cells, and we can scrape them off.
Okay.
Now in real life, we will get 20 eggs, 10 eggs, and they'll fertilize a bunch, and they'll put like 5 or 6 in. They're not going to put all of them in or only one of them in because, like I said before,
it's literally a shot in the dark. It's a guessing game. So there's no guarantee that all of them will be successfully certified. I said certified. Sorry, I meant to say fertilized.
Right.
There's no human guarantee that all of them or none of them will be fertilized.
Exactly.
There's a probability that some or none may be fertilized. There's a probability that some or none may be unfertilized. And even if they're fertilized, there's no human guarantee that they'll successfully latch on and cling to the endometrium.
Yeah. So in reality, all these fertility clinics, they're going to have leftover fertilized eggs. They've already put the DNA in them. They've already maybe start multiplying, or they'll freeze them.
Right.
Sometimes they'll take one of them, if you have like 10 of them, they'll take one of them and test the DNA. Do you have any genetic diseases? Is this a sickle cell family, thalassemia?
They basically give you a genetic profile.
They can. However, you're destroying an embryo, because you can't just take one or two off and hope it's going to re-multiply. It's so tiny and so early, it's only got 20 cells. You take a couple off and you're going to miss half the body.
Right.
So...
All right, so basically what you're saying is that after this in vitro takes place, you cannot implant this now fertilized egg into the womb of its mother, because definition, it will either not make it full term at all, or it will be so deformed that it wouldn't be worth trying to get someone pregnant with that egg, basically.
The eggs, the ones that you've harvested cells from.
Yeah, the one that you harvested stem cells from.
They're what they call not viable.
Right.
Which is the fancy way of saying they're not going to make it to term.
Right.
It's not like you could put it in, it's going to grow half a person, because these haven't differentiated into different parts of the body. There's just not enough cells. It won't recover.
No,
it just
but,
sort of
but not
breaks
just
apart.
that. The stem cells that you've harvested, you don't know what cells they were meant to be. Like, say for example, you harvest stem cells,
Yeah.
and those some of the stem cells that you harvested were designed by Allah, obviously through al-qadr wal-qada, through decree and providence. Those stem cells that you harvested were meant specifically. I mean, we don't know it. That's from the unseen.
Yeah.
But let's say, for example, Allah had patterned it, though that particular stem cell or stem cells, to create brain tissue.
Right.
So if you harvest that, obviously you can't live without a brain.
That's one of the problems.
Those type of things, or anything.
So
Right.
the answer is that it starts to break up. It just can't keep together.
Right.
Now, the cells have like a network thing going where, like, they figure, okay, this is the top, this is the bottom. We're going to turn these top cells into brain cells and these bottom cells into muscles. And you
Right.
can kind of figure out, like, based on what the neighbors are doing. So if you kill one cell, it can figure out, okay, it'll just fill in the gap.
But even still, there's no human guarantee that they'll play out that conveniently.
Yeah, we're taking too many away to harvest stem
Anyway,
cells.
right.
This is not to keep going. If we took just one cell, maybe, but we're talking about like a third of the thing. It's
Right.
not enough. It's just going to fall apart.
Right.
So the problem is the controversy is people. If you view life begins at conception, then this is ending a life. If you view it that way,
Right.
a lot of scientists are like, no, it doesn't start that. These are just cells in a petri dish. And to be fair, every day in the body, these cells are dying off.
Right.
Every single day, majority of fertilized eggs do not become pregnancies.
And then also an argument that people would make, or probably do make, is that since this is happening external of the womb, then it doesn't count as life, period. Even if they took that position that conception begins at birth, some people might take a posture that since the conception is occurring outside of a human host, then it's not really life. Some
see.
people might take that posture
Maybe.
as a means to justify the stem cell harvesting.
I haven't heard that one, but I know that some people say life is life, in vitro, inside
Right.
in vivo is in the body, in vitro is in the petri dish.
Right.
There was a very famous question a politician was asked a while back about this, where if you had if the fertility clinic is on fire,
Right.
and you have 6 fertilized embryos in a petri dish and a 6-year-old in the waiting room, which one would you save?
Wow.
And there was a politician, it was Rick Santorum, who said, I would save the petri dishes because that's 6 lives instead of 1. And he got a lot of angry pushback from people.
He was supposed to, because that was the wrong answer.
It was
Because
a strange
Islamically, you're
answer.
supposed to save the life of a person that's already alive.
Yeah.
That was just clearly the wrong answer.
It was a very strange answer to give, no doubt.
Like literally, there was no intelligence or morality in that answer. That was definitely a morality fail.
Well, he tried to say, he was a Roman Catholic, this is my Catholic belief that life begins at conception, so therefore if you follow that through, this is the answer you get. I'm not sure if anyone in the church ever backed him up on that.
And if they didn't, I'm glad they didn't. And if they did, that's pitiful, to say the least.
So because of this ethical problem, there's a lot of opposition, because all the pro-life people will automatically say that the stem cells are immoral. Because it doesn't matter what you're doing. I don't care how many lives you save, you're killing someone to get there.
Right.
And is it justified? So scientists are trying to find alternatives, because when this happens, politicians cut funding. So this has been a problem ever since
Forever.
Ever since forever. George W. Bush famously was.
I remember that.
Trying to say, should we allow it? Should we not allow it? He decided to make a compromise and say, okay, if we have existing stem cells in the fridge, we can use them, but no new lines.
Okay.
And nobody was happy.
Obviously.
Because
right.
researchers were like, okay, now you've just handicapped us.
You've put a limitation on it.
And the pro-life people were saying how, you can't just half measure life.
Right.
So scientists are trying to find alternatives to get around this ethical problem. They have one idea: we can take adult human skin cells and try, using a couple different chemicals and medications, turn back the clock and turn it into an undifferentiated stem cell. So if I can take a skin cell and rewind it, turn the DNA back into a stem cell, I might be able to use that. That research is further behind. We don't have a lot of success with it yet.
But why would they choose skin cells as opposed to any other type of cells?
It's easier to get a hold of, because otherwise I can take your blood. I can start taking, brain matter. It's just easier to take some skin cells.
What about hair cells?
Most of the time, your hair is actually dead. So you have to go to the root.
That's also
And then
true.
pulling the root is going to be a problem.
Right.
So they said skin cells are kind of easy. Just do a couple scrapes so we can get into the petri dish and start fiddling with it.
Okay.
Now, we don't know if these are going to work. That's the problem. They're testing them on some animals. Can we try to get it to work? It's not the same.
Right.
And most scientists say that, look, we need to research both until we find which one works better.
Right.
So
Ironically,
yeah.
this directly falls under the other episode that we did pertaining to anatomical donation.
It
Definitely does.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, because this, by definition, obviously you can't do this without consent.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Because, the first embryonic stem cells were from leftover embryos from in vitro fertilization.
Exactly.
And that's how they started. That's how they've been getting a lot of them from.
Exactly. So in terms of the Islamic posture pertaining to this, it's pretty cut and dry, is that the same ahkam or fatawa, the same revelatory regulations or religio rulings pertaining to anatomical donation is exactly the same as this pertaining to stem cell research.
Sure.
Because literally by definition, stem cells would be classified as anatomical donation. And if we know, anatomical donation is literally anything that you give forth of yourself from your body.
Yeah. So this does require informed consent for people who do donate embryos and eggs to do this.
Right.
So
let me just read off the different ikhtilafat, or the different religio-scholastic differing categories among Muslims pertaining to any anatomical donation, which stem cells would naturally fall under. The first category, which is the most conservative view, is that no kinds, types of anatomical donations under any circumstances are allowed. So in other words, this most conservative opinion is that any and all types of anatomical donation are mahrum. They're Islamically prohibited. They're not mahlul. They're not Islamically allowable. The second, less conservative stance or posture is that only anatomical donations are only allowable to benefit fellow Muslims. So in other words, if a Muslim is confronted by medical professionals or suggested or asked by medical professionals, would you like to donate, like, let's say post-birth placenta, or if you have eggs saved or frozen, or if you have sperm frozen, would you like to donate these things for biomedical research or stem cell research? A position that these particular scholars would take is that can only be allowable if you can have an agreement that this would only go towards Muslims, benefiting Muslims. And then the third opinion, which is less conservative, is that these anatomical donations, stem cell research included, could only be Islamically valid if it's a guarantee that it's going to one's loved ones. Right? And then the other opinion is that the anatomical donations can only be given if a person can still survive thereafter. So obviously with stem cells, it's not going to kill you if you donate sperm or eggs towards stem cell research.
Right.
So that's that opinion. And then the last opinion, which is the most liberal opinion, is that there's absolutely no religio restrictions regarding to anatomical donations.
I see.
So literally stem cell research directly falls under the umbrella of the last episode that we did regarding anatomical donation.
Okay.
Right. And the same ethical views fall under that as well, because in terms of who's going to benefit the most from these stem cell research.
Right.
Are there going to be global economic elites, political elites that benefit the most, or wealthy people or rich people who benefit the most? Or is it going to be available for everyone else to be able to benefit? Or are marginalized or are socioeconomically, sociopolitically marginalized persons are going to be denied stem cell research because of their socioeconomic or sociopolitical status? So that's another issue. The same thing with organ harvesting, organ donation, because we know the problems and the corruption involved with organ harvesting and organ donation is that by and large, people who are from the lower echelons of society, they have less access to anatomical donation.
Right.
So this stem cell research would be no different.
Sure. That's a very important point. So secular ethics they kind of split on this too, because to them this is a very high stakes thing. This could affect millions of people.
Billions even.
Billions, because every year over 1 million people have a heart attack every year, and we could.
And
use
that's just in the U.S. if I'm not
just
mistaken.
in the U.S. So we could use stem cells to help repair damaged hearts. Imagine grafting new
That's right,
heart
because
cells
every time a person acquires a myocardial infarction or heart attack, portions of their heart cells die.
Right. So if we could graft new heart cells there to replace the damaged ones with stem cells, that would be a game changer. Or if we could inject new pancreas cells into a diabetic patient's pancreas and repair the pancreas.
Or if a person is suffering from pancreatic cancer,
yes,
you can replicate a pancreas so that they don't die from pancreatic cancer.
Sure. So there's reports that they've done stem cells in lab mice, and they were able to cure the diabetes in lab mice. And they've been able to take some stem cells, marrow stem cells, and cure leukemia in some patients and treat some sickle cell with it. So it goes into that where people look at the consequences. There's two big schools of thought in medicine. There's one school, Kantianism, where like if it's wrong, it's always wrong, no excuses. It doesn't matter what's going to happen after. It's just ethical. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Then there's utilitarian people. Look, it's whatever helps the greatest number of people. Meaning, if I have to kill a few eggs to save a lot of lives, then it's worth it. That's the trade-off.
You mean like the concept of collateral damage?
Yeah, that's the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Right.
So a couple of eggs or like thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
And they're like, there's no contest. So it's a lot of people ethical saying, no, we need the greatest good. And there's paternalism, where we know best. If the family wants to give the eggs up, it's like a parent. So there's different ideas about this. And then also, this because the stem cells kind of come into a little bit of cloning, because I'm going to take your DNA, put it into some stem cells, and it's like cloning we talked about before.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it is a form of genetic replication.
Sure.
And that's a huge conflict of interest pertaining to the integrity of humanity.
Yeah, and you mentioned social justice before. That's actually a big part, because if you can't get stem cells in the U.S., and you really can't, people will go overseas. Rich people will go to Cuba or go to Europe and get it from there.
They'll get it how they get it.
Exactly.
Basically. And then also the issue of eugenics comes into play.
Sure. And I do want to talk. Eugenics is an interesting thing because it does come up here.
And it has to.
It has to. So, because this crosses into genetic therapies as well, because stem cells are kind of genetic therapy.
What is genetic therapy overall? What's the definition of genetic therapy?
Anything that modifies DNA. So if I can take a
that's
cell...
literally anything.
Pretty much a lot of different things.
I mean, even the whole concept GMO. Genetically modified organism.
Absolutely. So
speaking of, we're going to have to do an episode about GMOs.
We do at some point.
Yes.
So the way I was taught was, if we were to do genetic therapy, let's say it was a sickle cell patient, right? Sickle cell, it's genetic, it's hereditary. They give it to your kids, right? So now we have some stem cell therapy. We can take non-sickle cell bone marrow, inject it, and the body will start making regular blood cells without sickle cell shape.
Right.
You could cure a person of sickle cell with this.
But realistically, since it's genetic, there's no human guarantee that the body will never stop producing sickle cells.
It might. Because now you have two kinds of cells in your body, and then some of them are going to be sickle cells, some of them are regular.
But I'm just making the point that if it's something already set in stone in your DNA, you can't rewrite your DNA.
You really can't rewrite your DNA. Is the long and the short answer.
Right.
Well, the best I can say is if I'm giving you new bone marrow, I'm changing your bone marrow's DNA, but the rest of your body still has the sickle cell gene in it, meaning your sperm has a sickle cell. If I cured you, your kids could still have sickle cell.
No, that's what I mean.
Right.
So now, even if you're able to, let's say, for example, cure a person, there's absolutely no guarantee that those genes won't pass on to the next generation.
Right. Now, there are talk, what if I were able to give a special kind of virus that could change all your cells in your body, including your sperm cells, and modify your sperm so that your kids are never going to sickle cell again? Now, bioethics, that is eugenics. You cannot do that. That is crossing a line.
Because it goes into the playing God concept.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for someone to take that posture pertaining to stem cell research.
Yeah. From a very secular point of view, it's like, well, what's the difference? I'm changing one cell. How about change the other cell? Wouldn't it just be easier, cheaper, just to change your DNA so your kids don't have it? But you're right. You're playing God. That could be risky because now, there's risk factors here. What if your kids have even worse diseases because of this?
Right. Or what if they have a strand of sickle cell that was worse than you could have ever imagined, worse than you had it?
So this comes the GMO things. There's a big company called Monsanto, and they genetically modify crops. And they've
that's another discussion for another day.
They've had some screw ups where a mutant gene. Some.
Let's correct that to a lot. They've had a lot. What were you saying about the crops?
They had a mutant gene that was trying to make this special kind of gene there where weed killer would kill all the weeds but not their crops.
Right.
Well, the gene got kind of screwed up, and then it spread outside of the farm to other farms, and now they can't control it. So that's one issue. So we do have some live follow-up. We got a question here.
Sweet.
What about designer? What's your opinion on designer babies?
Again, we actually discussed that in terms of adoption and also in terms of surrogacy. We ended up mentioning that, how you mentioned how there's people, they kind of like, it's almost like they genetically order genes like Amazon. It's like you select like even like with sperm banks, sperm donation, they give you the option to select different like sperms of men of different ethnicities and stuff like that. So basically, it's like build a baby, but in real life.
Oh yeah, and even further,
but that's eugenics by definition.
It's absolutely eugenics.
Yeah.
Because you go in further, now people will do an ultrasound or DNA testing early on in pregnancy. Is this a boy or girl? Oh, I don't want a girl. Let's just abort it and start over. And in China and India, this is a real thing. Now they're passing laws against it, but people are still doing it. They're ignoring the laws.
Right.
I'm trying to remember if there's laws actually in the U.S. against that. There was a lot of talk about actually passing laws against that. You can't just use designer babies because it does cross some ethical lines. I don't actually remember if those are, if it's legal or not.
Yeah. But in terms of an Islamic posture, that's definitely something mahrum. That's definitely something Islamically prohibited, because you don't have a right to say, well, I don't want this type of child or I don't want that type of child.
Right.
A child is a gift from Allah.
Yeah.
So.
It makes sense. Because you really can't have an excuse. Well, I could take care of that child, but not the other child.
Exactly.
We talked about designer babies before, because we talked about this in the last episode. What if a baby has Down syndrome or something?
Right.
Under the abortion topic. And we went over this in the last episode at pretty big length.
Right.
All right. So there are clinical trials. There's stem cell research going on. There is... So actually, New York, because the federal government was very wishy-washy, Bush said no more stem cell research. Then Obama took over. He reopened all the doors again. I believe Trump closed all the doors quick, no more research anymore, and cutting all the funding.
Right.
New York and California were like, okay, we got a lot of very powerful medical schools here. We're going to fund it.
Right.
So now in New York State spent $63 million in embryonic stem cell research in the state. They're saying, if the federal government's not going to pay for it...
As opposed to combating homelessness. But that's another issue.
That's another issue. So
that's another issue for another type of show.
It's a tough one. How are you gonna? This is the question of what's the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Right.
So they'll say, well, the city...
I mean, it's ironic that they spent that much money just in New York State alone pertaining to stem cell research, when you could have used less than 1/4 of that money to solve the water crisis in places like Newark, New Jersey, and Flint, Michigan.
True.
You have places in Yemen that's being droned and bombed every day, and they have cleaner drinking water than places like Flint, Michigan, and Newark, New Jersey.
That's really true, and it's a very short-sighted people out there.
Yeah.
And all of these this can help everybody. If we find a breakthrough, think how much money this will save in healthcare costs if we have some sort of stem cell treatment. So it's a really tough question. How do you invest this? Where do you spend the money? And how to work it, because it's going to take years to really pay off. We're getting places with it,
right?
Like I said, because there are treatments. We have some existing cancer treatments for it, like I said,
right?
So the current stem cell laws prohibit research that involves cloning. So Dolly for a sheep, okay. Cloning of animals, kind of okay,
because they're not human.
But they're not human,
right.
Exactly. So they say you can do stem cell research, but it's got to be informed consent. You have to donate the eggs, the embryos, but it cannot use eugenics and it cannot clone. They're very, very specific on that. If you do that, they stop all the funding, and it probably is breaking a couple laws. There could be some criminal charges,
yeah,
depending.
Yeah, definitely. But in terms of that, what's the guarantee that they're not violating those ethical standards? Because we don't know what they're doing within the walls of those labs. Realistically, we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't. And there have been, in other countries, some countries that don't have the same ethics laws that we do. Some scientists who claim that they've made breakthroughs. There was a scientist, I believe it was in China, who claimed that he was able to successfully clone a human. And that's not legal in America. You can never do that here. if you find a country that has just no laws or easy or very permissive system, might be able to do it.
Right.
I don't believe he actually was able to prove it to the world that he did it.
Right.
But he got a lot of attention saying I was able to do it and no one can stop me.
Right.
So,
yeah, again, those type of things are very challenging and they're very problematic.
yeah.
Very
So there
problematic.
is some early evidence of stem cells being used. There was, if you're paralyzed, you have spinal cord injury, they were able to inject some stem cells into the spine and get people to start walking again. Now,
I remember when Christopher Reeve became paralyzed, that whole stem cell issue became an issue. Like, a lot of people were saying that specifically pertaining to his case. But his case was very far advanced.
That's right. So Christopher Reeve, if you'll remember, the young crowd, he played Superman.
The original Superman.
The original Superman. He was injured in a horseback riding accident and broke his neck. And from then on, he was paralyzed from the neck down in a wheelchair. He was a very big public advocate, celebrity advocate for stem cell research
Yeah.
because he said, this could actually cure me,
Right.
and why are we not doing it?
Right.
And he fought up against a lot of the anti-stem cell people who were the pro-life crowd who said that this was against stem cell research.
Right.
This was a very difficult issue.
And it's still a very difficult
It
issue.
still is because remember Ronald Reagan, he had Alzheimer's disease, and
Ironically.
so
And literally stem cell research is one of the things that I know for a fact can treat Alzheimer's.
so there was a
can
lot
treat
of
things like
there's a
dementia.
lot of promise,
Yeah.
a lot of potential for this, and there were some people. Republicans who said, because he's dying, let me change my position. Stem cells are probably okay.
Right.
Which is a very strange
Very
sort of
hypocritical.
position.
Very hypocritical, yeah.
It's like you're against abortion until your daughter gets pregnant. Oh, well, I changed my mind.
Right.
Yeah,
it's very hypocritical.
It's very hypocritical.
Very hypocritical. Yeah.
But there was a lot of talk about that, if that can help induce things for it. Bush, up until the end.
Which Bush? Bush Senior or Bush Junior?
So Bush Jr., W. Bush,
Yeah.
he, one of the rare times he actually vetoed Congress. Congress passed stem cell research laws, and Bush, in 2006, 2007, vetoed it. He said, I don't care. I'm saying no to this. And to drive his point home, he had a bunch of children on the stage and said, these are all in vitro fertilization test tube baby children. They all would have died if you took those eggs.
Wow.
I don't quite think that...
That was pathetic.
Well, he vetoed it. I don't think there was enough votes to override his veto, so we were kind of stuck there.
Yeah, clearly.
But a year or two later, Obama got
Ended up
elected
getting it reversed.
and reversed it. Yeah.
Right.
So, someone just question from the audience: maybe use stem cells to somehow have chlorophyll to make food that could help with hunger in people who don't have access to food. I know it'd be ethically not right, but body making its own food. So I think the
That's
question.
interesting.
I think the idea is that if I were to change your DNA so that you could get chlorophyll, like the plant behind us here, to generate its own food from sunlight, that's a pretty neat idea. The only problem is humans need. It's a cool idea. If we could genetically change people so they need less food, or we can make our own food, or breathe underwater.
Well, the issue of food shortages, that's actually a geopolitical fallacy. There's not a shortage of food. There's a shortage of philanthropy. Because
spreading the food around.
Exactly. Proper distribution of resources. The United States is barely 5% of the U.S. population, yet consumes at least 30% of global resources. I watched a documentary about China on Wide Angle, PBS.
Yeah.
And it estimated that if China produced the same, if China consumed the same amount of resources as the United States, we would need 8 Earths to supply China.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's
And then also you have to remember, not only do we have a pathological consumption, consumerism culture, we have a pathological waste culture. We waste everything. Food is one of the biggest things that we waste in the United States alone.
Oh, absolutely.
So someone saying changing the DNA so that we can get chlorophyll, guess what? People would capitalize on chlorophyll. You would have to pay for chlorophyll.
Yeah.
They would charge exuberant prices for chlorophyll. They would be selling chlorophyll in freaking Trader Joe's. So that's clearly not solving the problem.
There's a very famous saying for Haitians that says, God gives, but he doesn't share. The idea is that God gives us everything we need, but it's up to
I get
us
it. It's
to
our responsibility.
We
Right.
got to divvy up the loot, man.
Right. and clearly, based on the fact that the world is the way it is, even historically, it's proof that that's not happening. Like I said, there's not a lack of resources. There's a lack of philanthropy.
Right.
There's a lack of charity. There's a lack of empathy. Apathy has always been part of the human story as being the flavor of the day, the order of the day. But in our time period, apathy has taken much more of a powerful posture.
Yeah. There was, I think last week, there was a question I was watching the presidential town halls, and this woman asked Bernie Sanders, we're overpopulating, would you support birth control around the world? And he answered, I think, I support birth control, should be free and available to everyone. But people interpreted that as you're trying to restrict how many kids we're having, and you're trying to...
So basically they accused him of being pro-eugenics?
They did accuse him of being pro-eugenics. He didn't say anything about that, but they kind of... The headlines were that he's supportive of eugenics sort of policies,
right.
And that's not what he said.
Yeah.
And and still, like, you agree with you. We don't have a food shortage of overpopulation. We have a distribution problem, like you said.
Exactly. We have a consumption and a waste problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Thinking about back to the original question, though, your body needs 2,000 calories a day.
And chlorophyll just ain't gonna do it.
Not enough, because if you're moving around,
Yeah, exactly. The reason why that works for plant life is because plant life is immobile. That's not gonna work for the human being. It's just not realistic.
It's just not the right proportions.
Exactly.
For it.
Yeah.
So the same way, if we had gills, it's just not enough oxygen because you're a big person.
Exactly.
That's why the biggest fish in the sea are mammals. Well, not fish; they're mammals.
Right.
For that kind of reason.
Right. Well, even the largest, like the whales and the whale shark and all of these big animals, that's their only habitat anyway. So of course it makes sense that the oxygen that they're getting is mainly exclusively from the water.
Right.
They're aquatic creatures. We're not aquatic.
Sure.
So for you to try to manipulate our genetics for us to be able to breathe underwater, that's not sustainable for us. Because first of all, in the animal kingdom, you don't have to teach an animal how to swim. They just adapt to it's just natural. Like, in other words, like, you don't teach a sea turtle how to swim.
Right.
They just swim. As soon as they hatch in the sand, they go right into the water and they know what to do.
Yeah. Makes sense.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So we have instinct built in for a lot of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, humans have our own. We have the fitra, right?
Yeah. One of the definitions of fitra is instinct.
So what is the fitra, to start off?
Well, the word fitra is pertaining to what Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, no human being is born except upon al-fitra. However, their parents make them Jews, Christians, fire worshippers, what have you. So this term al-fitra comes from the Arabic verb fatara, which means to origin or to originate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So fitra, and it's ironic, the word Eid al-Fitr literally means like the feast of origin, because it's not the nature of humans to not eat.
Oh, wow.
And that's why the word iftar, like meal, like post-fasting meal, or what we would say breakfast, because literally when you're asleep, that's like a form of fasting, because you're not eating while you're asleep. So when you have like breakfast, right, or when you have iftar, or you're eating after you're fasting, the reason why the word iftar is derived from the Arabic verb fatara, the reason why the word fitr, which means feast or festival or celebration, the reason why it's derived from the Arabic verb fatara, which means it's not instinctive, it's not natural for the human being to ever stop eating. Because remember, fasting doesn't exist in the animal kingdom. Animals don't fast. They don't deny themselves nutrition.
I see.
You know what I'm saying? That's exclusively a mandate from Allah for us to take a portion out of the year or out of our days to not eat or drink.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, that's a really, I never knew all that. That's really cool. I always had the impression that the fitra was like the easy way to say it's like a moral compass.
No, yeah. See, that's the Islamic definition of fitra. The Islamic definition of fitra is literally synonymous with at-tawheed.
Yeah.
At-tawheed commonly translated as Islamic monotheism, right? So at-tawheed, and linguistically, it means unanimity or unity or oneness. So the Islamic definition of at-tawheed is the recognition and acceptance of the existence and the oneness of Allah, meaning we recognize the fact that the universe didn't create itself. We recognize and accept the reality that Allah, based on what he teaches us via a tanzil, via revelation, is that he is the one who created and oversees the affairs of the universe. and that he's singular, and that he's unique, and that he's eternal, and that he has no rival, no equal, no parents, no children, all of that.
Right.
So all of that is at-tawhid, and all of that is fitrah. So the Islamic definition of al-fitrah is at-tawhid. And like I mentioned, the linguistic definition of al-fitrah means origin or originality or instinct.
I see. Wow. Okay. So I guess the questions we were thinking about for today were, because we're going back to stem cells,
Right.
Is there any Islamic position of making stem cell research halal? Because the question is...
Well, like I mentioned,
Yeah.
the exact same premise that you would have to use in terms of anatomical donation, stem cell research falls under that.
Yeah.
Because stem cells, by definition, fall under anatomical donation.
Right. It also ties into, embryology and, questions about when does life begin.
Right.
So, and for that point, as I understand it, generally Muslim scholars have said, at least the ones I've heard in English, have said that if this is helping a lot of people, it's just damaging embryos, this would be permissible. Because Muslims don't believe that life begins at conception, that
it depends on which opinion that you take.
Oh, that's right.
Because remember, by virtue of the fact that a person is considered a bastard child that they've conceived out of wedlock, that by definition is proof that life begins at conception.
Right.
Because let's say, for example, if you get a woman pregnant and you're not married to her and you marry her after you find out she's pregnant, Islamically that child is still a bastard child because it was conceived out of wedlock.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing is, because we talked about this could potentially help a lot of people, but
it can equally potentially hurt people and set people in very marginalized spaces and places.
Sure, there's risk
and,
here.
and then also, ultimately, you have the people being emboldened to manifest this playing God pathology even further.
Sure.
So it takes this is very murky water, to say the least.
Yeah, it can be. This goes back to the age-old philosopher's question: Do the ends justify the means? If I'm going to help a lot of people, is it okay if I kill one or two? Like, is there a lesser haram here?
But again, also with that is that you have to consider who's at the helm and who's in power and who has the keys to the purses for these types of research. There are global elites who are in league with governments, who are in league with pharmaceutical industries, medical industries, and they don't necessarily have the greater good in mind and heart. They're dollars and cents types of people. So whatever is the bottom line and whatever is going to embolden them to chase the bag, if you will, those are the postures that they're going to take.
Yeah.
So their postures are really not suited for the greater good, even though that's the mythology that's pontificated and promoted. We know, especially us as medical professionals, we know that all that glitters is not gold.
Right.
We know that through our respective professional fields.
Sure. So the next question I have is, if we were to take stem cells or embryos and change the DNA, because we could basically clone.
Right.
There was an idea. This is years ago, where if I were to take your DNA and put it into an embryo, grow it out until I get organs. Basically, can we clone people to get organs?
Again, that goes into the same thing about everything else, anatomical donation.
Yeah.
The same rules apply.
It's absolutely true. It does get sort of this. The problem is, as you see, as it gets more complex, it gets kind of a dicier issue.
And then even in terms of that, what's the guarantee that, let's say, for example, if you say, okay, I'm going to do this, but only if it benefits me. Now, if they say no, that's a super red flag. That's a super red flag, because if you can't benefit from your own stem cell donation, what does that say?
Right.
That says a lot. That's very telling. That speaks volumes.
It does. There was an idea years ago where what if we took your DNA, took a monkey embryo, and swapped the monkey's DNA for yours, basically grow a monkey up to an adult, and then take its liver and give it to you.
Again,
this goes back to that.
That goes into the playing God pathology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was an interesting idea because the idea is if it's your DNA, you're not going to reject it. But
that's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
Because remember, these things are artificially facilitated.
Yeah. And is it ethical to do this on animals? It brings up a lot of questions.
Well, even before the animal, because remember, a human is more important than an animal.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And I think most people can agree on that.
let's hope so.
Let's hope so. You would be surprised.
Exactly.
I'm waiting for one day someone's going to donate their organs to an animal at one point. I'm just waiting for that day.
Allah knows best. That probably has already been tried.
It would make
Already.
get a lot of press attention. Someone would be famous if they did it. I wouldn't do it, but
That would be one of the epitomes of stupidity. Honestly. So yeah, that's what it is. So again, it's a murky issue. And like I said, the fact that Muslim scholars, religious scholars, have so many varied opinions about it, there's no one right answer. Like I already have my own conclusions. I'm sure
Right.
you already have your own conclusions. But it's important for us every time or anytime we do these episodes to display the varied options, to be just and to be fair.
Right.
And our purpose is to empower people to come to their own conclusion, not to piggyback off of or ride our bandwagon. Because that's not what this podcast is for. This podcast is to try to open up a venue and a window for people to be more informed and to be more educated about
Yeah.
these issues so that they can be empowered to draw their own conclusions and make their own life decisions.
yeah. Interesting fact about stem cells, because they were able to prove this in lab mice, maybe not in humans yet, but improved in lab mice, that if a mother is pregnant and she gets injured, the baby will give some of its stem cells to the mother to help heal. They can't prove this in humans yet, but they're able to prove this in lab mice, which is actually really cool.
That's interesting. But I mean, also you have to expect that because the complexity of vermin genetics
Yeah.
are not nearly as high up as human genetics. Human
Right.
genetics are by far the most complex of genetics,
Right.
you know?
So the other question was, it's not just because a lot of people who are against stem cells, they tie it to abortion. But the other question is this desecrating human remains?
That's a good point. In many respects, definitely. Because literally the whole purpose of a sperm fertilizing an egg is to promote human life.
Right.
But if you're doing that, and then after you do that, you're literally destroying that. In a way, you're literally destroying life.
Right. And we talked before, a previous episode about organ transplants. There's objection for the same reason, is that desecrating human remains.
Right.
Now we talked about,
But that's exclusively pertaining to donation post-death.
Right.
Now, in terms of donating while you're alive, there's still people who would take that posture, but in all reality, is a different issue.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between anatomical donation while you're alive,
Yes.
and then anatomical donation after you're dead.
That makes sense.
It's significantly different.
So, yeah. It's they were able to clone human embryos already in South Korea, and that brings us we talked about cloning a few minutes ago.
Right,
It's
right,
its own
right,
different
right.
can of worms there. But there is to just talk about other religions, Judaism is very similar to Islam on these points. The general consensus is it would be permissible at that point, although there are some opinions against it.
Right.
The Christian church, mainly the Catholic Church, is very specifically anti. Caution to condemnation is the range of any research that creates, uses, or destroys human embryos. So creating embryos, not cool. Destroying them, definitely not permissible. Using them, it's be very careful here. In vitro fertilization is sort of viewed, I think, as an exception to that rule, because you're still trying to
promote life. Right.
For that reason. But there's not it's not really one voice here. It seems like it's still an issue up in the air.
There's many voices, but the voice that's speaking the loudest is pertaining to what some would argue the misuse or the abuse of anatomy. Because
Right.
again, the purpose of the sperm and the purpose of the purpose of the sperm and the purpose of the egg is to facilitate human life.
Right.
That's the purpose. That's the reason why Allah allowed it to be created, and that's why it keeps being created genetically throughout humans. That's
Yes.
its purpose. So to use it for something other than its maslaha, other than its purpose, that by definition is classically theologically problematic,
Makes sense.
just overall.
So yeah, that's
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
that's
Yeah.
pretty much it. We've had a lot of different points about this.
Is there any other questions?
Sadly, not yet. But if anyone in the audience is having questions, feel free to send us a message, or after this broadcast is over, send us a post on Facebook. We'll definitely.
Oh wait, what about the polls?
Let's open up the poll now, right now. So hit
Cool.
publish now.
Is it gonna publish all four or just one?
You have just one? Yep. Just hit that. Okay. So it's published the first one here.
Okay.
Any thoughts or feelings about stem cell research? It's a terrific initiative. It's weird science. Don't know if I can or should, or I don't agree with it totally. I'm not sure how I would answer that one. It really could be. I expect because most people watch the rebroadcast later. I expect we're going to have a pretty.
Let's hope so.
Diverse set of opinions here.
Let's hope so.
I wonder if anyone's going to get the majority on this one.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. The responses that we get. That would be really interesting. So that's the first one.
Okay. Check the box above it. Allow voting after underneath the switch. Right under it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely. Yeah. We definitely gotta do that. Yeah.
So let's publish the second one underneath. Publish.
Another one.
Okay. Was there a second one?
Was it?
I think we just have one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I only put up one. Yeah.
Okay. So hit publish results. Okay, so now we're going to have the results to be posted here when the stream is over.
And
we'll go from there.
That's good.
Yeah, pretty good.
So we hope you enjoyed this live as much as we did presenting it to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit us up on the page, the Sharīah's Anatomy page. If you like this live, please share it. Please like the page if you like what we're doing. Please share it with other people. Please follow us on Instagram. Sharīah's Anatomy. So that basically sums it up, right?
That does sum it up. So if any questions, feel free to leave a comment on our Facebook page for new topics, future topics. We could always talk about that.
Yeah, any suggestive topics that you would want us to speak about pertaining to Islamic biomedical ethics, please share anything that you would want us to talk about. We're more than willing to explore it and research it and kick it back to the public.
Yep. Any feedback, feel free to message us. We'll try to talk. If you have any questions, we'll try to address it on our next episode. So for those of you just joining us midway through, I'm James.
I'm Gareth.
Okay, we'll see you again soon next week.
Thank you.